this video, we're going to talk about some of our regrets after selling from this warehouse for a whole year. And we're also going to show you our end of year financial wrap. There's a bit of an expectation versus reality situation.
And before we get into our regrets, we want to talk about our last financial year numbers. We're going to talk about our total revenue and also what that means in terms of percentage profit in our pocket. And we think this is a really important thing to share because it kind of shows what running a business like this takes.
So let's talk numbers. For the last financial year, our first year in this warehouse, we set a goal of revenue between $600,000 and $700,000.
So our goals for FY 22-23 is to turn over $600,000 to $700,000 between the three stores.
700 being a little bit of a stretch. So what did we actually achieve? For financial year 22 to 23, we ended up at a gross revenue of $696,237.
Which is so close to our stretch goal, it's almost a little bit painful.
So that's everything that came in, but let's talk about our percentage profit.
So our goal for profit percentage this year was actually 32%. And I'll put up some figures here. This is actually from the dashboard, and a few of you might recognize this from the spreadsheet that we put out a couple of weeks ago. Firstly, a big thank you for everyone that did purchase that, and I hope it does help you with this next financial year. So what did we actually turn over profit percentage wise? It ended up being about 27% profit. So that is below the 32% that we had hoped for, which definitely impacts that final profit margin. Now, there are a couple of outliers that have caused that to happen, and one of those is this massive camping lot that we got literally 2 weeks before the end of financial year. So prior to that, we were tracking about 30% in-pocket profit after all our expenses. So that includes GST and taxes because that's all incorporated in our spreadsheet, which allows us to track how much money comes in and goes out. And because we're set up as a company, the only outlier to that is going to be if the company makes a profit and therefore has to pay some percentage on top of that to the tax office. However, the way we've sort of structured things, essentially all that profit ends up to us as wages. Therefore, the business is probably not going to make a huge amount of profit this year because we've paid ourselves that profit in wages.
So we personally made money, but our company breaks even.
Well, at least that's the goal. So obviously $700,000 sounds like a lot of revenue, and it is. But once we take everything out, including our GST, our rent, all of our overheads, essentially this business made us about $180,000, $190,000 this year. Future Brad here, and I just wanted to clarify something because in the edit, I realized I kind of skipped over this a little bit, and I think it is a very important part of sharing these numbers. So when I say that we have deducted everything to get to that figure, I do mean everything. So that includes the stock that we have on hand that has been unsold to this point in time. It does include our GST, which I did mention. It even includes the taxes that we pay on our wages. Because we are a business and set up as a company, we know that as we go how much we need to pay in tax. So that is all included in there. It includes all our overheads, our rent for our warehouse, all of our shipping, all of our electricity, internet, all those things that you can possibly think of to take away from that profit margin is included in that figure. And that's why I use the spreadsheet, because I have all that information on hand. So I just wanted to say that before we move on to the next part.
We're pretty proud of that considering all of the initial expenses of getting a business set up for its first year.
And obviously that's not a corporate high-flying pay. However, our goal this year is to increase that. And there's a couple ways we're looking at doing that. So we've reset some goals, and we're hoping that now that we are set up, our profit percentage can increase to over that 32% profit that we had projected.
That's all of the numbers out of the way, so let's talk about some of the things we regret.
So our first regret is sell-through. Now, obviously moving into this warehouse, we naturally had to increase our listing goals and therefore our turnover goals quite significantly straight off the bat. We essentially needed to make an extra $150,000 to $200,000 straight away compared to what we're making at home. One of the factors that led to our sell-through rate not being where we would like it to be on the main store is we essentially had to ratchet this up very quickly, which meant that whatever stock we had on hand had to be thrown into the pool for us to list. So some of the stuff we were listing in the early days wasn't necessarily the highest sell-through stock, which has now led to us having too much stock in the store and not enough sold.
So the regret is, with just trying to get many listings up, we didn't make any time to go back and deal with the stock that wasn't selling, and we've ended up with dead stock.
Another big factor to that is all of these classical CDs. So we bought about 8,000 of these brand new sealed CDs from an auction locally over about 4 to 6 months. But what's happened with these is we now have 3,400 CDs listed in our store with a slower sell-through rate. So all the really good high value ones went pretty quickly, but now we're stuck with all these CDs that are just sitting there. So we're slowly starting to reduce the prices on this, and hopefully that'll then reduce that amount of stock listed in our store. And don't get me wrong, those CDs have been amazing for us. We have made some really good money on it, but like I said, we bought so many that now there's still quite a few just sitting in the store. And when it comes to sell-through rate, we think a much better example of what we would like to implement going forward has been the DVD store, because our sell-through rate on that store is quite good considering the stock that is listed there. And we haven't even got to that 6-month mark where we're actually going to be clearing out a lot of stock, so that sell-through rate will naturally increase as well. Okay, moving on to regret number 2, and it's probably something that we've always had a little bit of trouble with, is we essentially buy everything and anything we find, which leads to a bit of an everything store, which has its advantages, but it also has its disadvantages, because there's categories that we get that we don't list regularly, and therefore potentially slower sales in those categories, which is why people niche, because they're constantly listing in that category and they have the same type of customer. So we've actually started reducing the categories that we put through our store, and yesterday I actually cleared out pretty much a whole rack of board games and a couple toys that we're not really going to be listing anymore, not because they're not worth money, but because they're big, they take up a lot of space, and they take up a lot of time to actually deal with.
For example, if you're going to pack a skillet, you want it to sell for $110 like this one did. Otherwise, it's just not worth the time.
Regret number 3 is probably we haven't utilized all of our stock liquidation options. So you'll see behind me, we now have an auction shelf. We have been pushing stuff through auction here and there, but this year we're really looking to ramp that up so that sell-through on the main store becomes a lot more manageable for us going forward.
Our 4th regret stemmed from something that was quite necessary, which was we had to be really hands-on in this first year, and we would like to have a bit more freedom and flexibility in our business, which leads us to the solution: employing someone.
So we're looking to employ someone on a part-time basis, probably 6 to 10 hours a week, to help us with some listing and also some packaging, which will allow us to get back to those items that have been sitting on the shelf and are that dead stock, which kind of improves the whole situation that we've been talking about. So now we've talked about some of the regrets for our business in the last financial year. Let's talk about some of the things we need to continue improving on this financial year. So our business model has always been trying to get a higher ASP. On our 2 main stores, we're sitting around $60, and on the DVD store, we're sitting around $38. So there's kind of 2 models in the reselling business that we see quite a lot. There's either the high volume bread and butter store with a lower ASP and hopefully a high sell-through, or there's the model that we try to take with a higher ASP and hopefully a really good sell-through, but we're going to continue to aim for the higher ASP model, which means we essentially have to list less and hopefully ship less to get the same profit in our pocket. Now, I'm not saying one model is better than the other, but for us with such high overheads, it is really important we continue to strive for that higher ASP. And we need some process improvements going forward. So you guys can see behind me that we have 2 listing stations at this point in time, well, 2 photography stations. We want to add some changes into this warehouse that'll make our listing process a lot easier. So we're looking at implementing a measurement board so we can just snap a really quick photo rather than measuring when we're actually drafting. And we're also trying to make a little bit more space in certain areas to allow us to get through our listings a lot quicker. And lastly, we need to continue sourcing more products like we just got with this camping gear. So we want to move into this higher ASP, bigger stock quantity coming into our store. Now, obviously this is a pretty unique opportunity and it's not always going to come up, but we are starting to build those networks that allow us to do more of this sort of liquidation stock, which will hopefully help us build towards our goals in this new financial year. Which brings us to our goals for this next financial year. So because we're essentially going to be employing someone, we definitely need to increase that turnover. So we're hoping to hit between $700,000 and $800,000 this year, which doesn't necessarily mean more listing. It means that we have to have a higher sell-through rate and try and get rid of some of this stock that has been sitting around for way too long now. Which means we need to continue listing some more of this camping gear. Luckily, we've actually gone through about 5 pallets and only have 3 left for those that have been playing along. And hopefully with all these goals and changes in place and recognizing the regrets that we've had in this last financial year, we can continue to improve in our reselling business and share the journey with you guys as well.
See you on the next one.